Hi, my name is Mark, and in 1984, when I was 24 years old, I stood up from my office chair and strained a muscle. Very painful, went straight to the floor in severe low back pain. The pain persisted, and sitting became the hardest thing to do. I continued to work for 6 years after that. Then in 1991, I had two minor fender benders where I was rear-ended. And from there, the pain started to grow worse. And by December of 1991, I was completely disabled. 31 years of pain put me in bed an average of about 20 hours a day. The pain spread to my upper back, pain in my neck, I had headaches, and there were times when I had pain all over my body, even in my arms. I tried every kind of drug. I had a spinal fusion. I had a second back surgery after that. I saw chiropractors and physical therapy, traction, massage therapy, neurofeedback, psychological therapy, pain clinics, acupuncture, etc., everything. And only some of these provided limited temporary relief. Some days and nights seemed to go on forever and left me just waiting to die. But the funny thing about, well, it's not so funny, but what's true about pain is that it doesn't kill you. And it amazed me how much pain I could have over that long period of time. Then in November of 2022, everything began to change. And 6 weeks later, on January 1st of 2023, I was pain-free. The purpose of this video is that I'd like to share how that happened, because I think there are a lot of people out there who this could help. It all began when I watched the two videos you are about to see of some neuroscientists who describe the nature of pain and its source. You're going to see some things that you may already be familiar with, but be on the lookout for anything that you may not have heard before.
As everyone goes, great, quick nap. Don't have a nap. Raise your hand, just squeeze your left ear as hard as you can. Raise your hand if it hurt. Fantastic. Thanks for having me. No, that's not true. Let me tell you a story. I just want to take that off the screen for the moment. I want to tell you a story that will explain to you the first 3 years of the neurobiology of pain that you would study at university. 8 years ago, I was walking in the bush. I had a sarong on. Very cool. This is what happened. Did you see that? Hang on. This is what happened. Biologically, I'm going to tell you what happened just then. Something touched the outside of my left leg in the skin. That activates receptors on the end of big, fat, myelinated, fast-conducting nerve fibres. And they stream straight up my leg, straight into my spinal cord, up to this part of my brain. And they say, "You've just been touched on the outside of your left leg in the skin." Meanwhile, whatever it was is sufficiently intense to activate free nerve endings. We call them nociceptors. They're thin, unmyelinated, slow-conducting Lada Niva. Someone knows what a Lada Niva is. Nerve fibres. And that message travels up to my spinal cord, and it gets to my spinal cord, and that's as far as it goes. And it says to a fresh neuron in my spinal cord, you've just been, something dangerous has happened on the outside of your left leg in the skin, mate. And the spinal nociceptor takes that message up to the thalamus, which sits in there somewhere, and says, there's danger on the outside of your left leg in the skin, mate. Now the brain has to evaluate how dangerous this really is. So it looks at everything. And the way that I make sense of this, of what happened to me, is the brain thought, frontal lobe, have we been anywhere like this before? Hang on, I'll just ask the posterior parietal cortex. Have we been in this environment before? Yes, we have. Has it happened at this stage of the gait cycle? Yes, it has. Is it coming from the same location? Yes, it is. What is it? Well, your whole life growing up, you used to scratch your legs on twigs. This is not dangerous. I'm going to give you, the organism, just something so you can kick off the twig and continue on your merry way. And that's what happened for me. I can't show you now, but I took off my sarong, got in the river, got out of the river, and that's the last thing I remember, having been bitten by an eastern brown snake. Survivor. Thank you very much. Now, for some reason, the eastern brown snake works by poisoning you, clearly, and one of the things that it does is activates nerve fibres. So actually, my brain would have got all these messages saying, danger, 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 danger. And in its wisdom, it said, no, 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 no. 6 months later, I'm walking in the bush with a boring talker. You know what a boring talker is? Those people, it doesn't matter what they say, it's boring. That's irrelevant, but we'll call her Naomi, because that is her name. Anyway, this is what happened, right? Oh, wah! And I am in agony. I have got a white hot poke of pain screaming up my leg. I'll tell you biologically what's happened. Something touched the outside of my left leg in the skin. That activates big fat myelinated nerve fibres, which send a message up to here. Just me touching the outside of your left leg in the skin. It's sufficiently intense to activate these free nerve endings, danger receptors. Take the message to my spinal cord. Just been something dangerous has happened on the outside of your left leg in the skin. Yes. Well done. You weren't planted. That goes to the thalamus and says the same thing. Something dangerous has just happened on the outside of your left leg in the skin. So the brain says, thanks very much, thalamus. Kids all right? Good. Anyway. Frontal cortex. Anything to tell me about this? Hang on, I'll ask the posterior parietal cortex. Where are we? We're walking in the bush. Oh. You're a bit mate happy. This stage of the gait cycle, where's it coming from? Have we been here before? Oh, yes, we have. Last time we were here, you almost died. I'm going to make this hurt so much that you can do nothing else. And I was in absolute agony for what seemed like minutes, screaming pain, until one of my mates looked at my leg and there's a little scratch from a twig. The pain in those situations was totally different because of meaning. I want to try and convince you that pain is an illusion 100% of the time. Here's a visual illusion. So if you have a look at this picture, you've got a square that's got A in it and a square that's got B in it. Raise your hand if you think that the square with A in it looks darker than the square with B in it. Thank goodness for that. None of you have a really socially embarrassing neurological disorder, except you. That's not true. But watch what happens if we have another look at this. These are those two squares taken out of that picture. And hopefully you can see that they're identical, and some of you may not believe me, so I'll just put A on top of that, and I'll put B on top of that. And some of you may still not believe me, so why don't we just move A over on top of B, or B over on top of A. No matter how long you look at this, A will look darker than B, because your brain's doing some really groovy stuff, really quickly, outside of your awareness. Have a look at this. Turn your head on the side and have a look at the same picture. Nothing changes. Fantastic, 100% tape. So what really happens here, exactly the same frequency is hitting your retina, and that sends a message to the back of the brain. And then all of this groovy stuff happens very quickly to ask the question, what does this really mean? What's biologically advantageous for me? And then you get a visual image. This is a visual illusion. And vision's not about emotion. Vision's not necessarily about survival, but pain is. Now, some of you might not know if you're not medically trained, but what's happening at this guy's leg, right leg, that's not right. It's a dangerous situation, and that danger message arrives at the brain, and the brain has to ask exactly the same question. What does this mean? What should be done here? And hopefully, the orchestra in this person's brain will make your leg hurt. In the work that I've been doing for a long time, we're trying our best to work out how do we convince people in pain that we understand they're in pain, but it's not just about the tissues of their body. How do we convince them of that? And a key conceptual shift that we think is really important is that you can understand that pain is the end result. Pain's an output of the brain designed to protect you. It's not something that comes from the tissues of your body. There's nothing there. 100% of the time, pain is a construct of the brain. We can mess with pain really easily without touching the tissues. This is an experiment we did a while ago where we got supposedly normal, healthy volunteers. They're not normal people because they're volunteering for a pain experiment. But let's say they're reasonably normal, right? And we put a very cold piece of metal on the back of their hand. And we just show them one of two lights. One light is red and one light is blue. We don't tell them anything about the lights, we just show them the light. I see that hand. And we ask them, how much does it hurt? And if they see the red light, it hurts more than if they see the blue light. The stimulus is exactly the same. What's different is the meaning of the stimulus. Now there's a cue that says this is really hot because red means hot. So the sensible brain, the clever brain, should say, well, I really don't want you to do it. So I'm going to make it really hurt. These people in the States are allowed to get their psychology students to participate in experiments in exchange for credit points or sex or something. Anyway, they put their head inside what they think is a stimulator for their head, and they make sure that the subject can see the intensity knob. And as they turn up the intensity knob, this picture, the little figure there showing the lines going up at a steady rate, that's their reported head pain, and it matches the intensity knob. But the stimulator's doing nothing. It's just one of those old-fashioned plastic hair dryers that doesn't do anything. Yeah, you know those things? Yeah, you probably use one. Yeah. The trick is that they have to see the intensity knob. And I always think it'd be fun to do an experiment based on that Spinal Tap film where the intensity knob goes up to 11. Remember that film? What's really important from a clinical perspective, and I'm a clinical neuroscientist and I see patients in pain, any piece of credible evidence that they're in danger should change their pain. And they're all walking into hospital departments with models like this on the desk. What does your brain say when it sees a disc that's slipped so far out it's sitting on its own? If you've ever seen a disc in a cadaver, you can't slip the suckers. They're immobile. You can't slip a disc. But that's our language, and it messes with your brain. It cannot not mess with your brain. We can even modulate the location of pain. We can do some groovy things. It's quite well established that referred pain gives you pain in an area of your body that might be physiologically normal. And most of you would have heard of referred pain. Bless you. We do experiments where we give you pain in an artificial limb. It's not even yours. This is Meng, who was a postdoc in my lab in Oxford in the UK, and we stole a prosthetic limb, which is a whole other story, which is really funny, but I won't tell it to you. And we can do this manipulation so that you start to feel like the plastic limb in front of you is yours. And we can make the rubber hand hurt. And we can bring in a knife and run the knife across the rubber hand, and you have your brain responses to protect that rubber hand. You're feeling pain in a lump of plastic, effectively. Here's a groovy experiment where we take two Microsoft clip art people and we put a webcam on the forehead of one of them and a set of virtual reality glasses on the other one. And then we get them to shake hands, and as they're shaking hands, the person on your right, who's wearing the goggles, their visual field is coming from the other person's forehead. Have you got it? So they are effectively looking at the other person thinking it's them because they're shaking hands, the motor command fits, everything's good. And then we come in and put a painful stimulus on that person's arm, and they see it hit the arm of the person over there with whom they're shaking hands. And they say, ouch, it really hurts. And we say, where does it hurt? On that man's arm. And they get it right every time. They point exactly where it is, but if you're an outside taking a photo of that, They're literally, we've got the painful stimulus here and they're saying, it hurts there. So the brain is not only producing pain, it's projecting it to this location in midair. We can mess with that. This all becomes really important when pain persists, because two things happen when pain persists that make the life of someone in pain really difficult, that cost our country $40 billion a year, cost Australia more than cancer, cardiovascular disease and diabetes combined. Thanks for that facial expression. I wanted someone to go. This is the problem, that if we keep running the neurons, the brain cells that produce pain, they get better at producing pain. They become more and more sensitive, so we need a smaller and smaller influence. The illusion, if you like, in increase in sensitivity becomes very unhelpful. It's trying to protect you from something that's not needing protection. It's very real. The other thing that happens is that all of these networks lose their capacity to be specific and precise. So the pain spreads. The pain changes its quality. Ultimately, it's not even informative. It's both unhelpful and uninformative. Maybe the next TED Talk ever is the really important question, what do we do about it? Who knows? But no, we do know. That's what we're really researching, but that's the end of my 18 minutes. Thank you very much for having me. It was cool.
That's kind. Thank you. I'm going to tell you a story. It's a uniquely American story. And to borrow a phrase from a TV show that I've never seen but heard of, it's an American horror story. This is a guy, 41 years old, who I saw for low back pain, 7 years. It started, he was 34, so he was running. He had no injury, but he started having pain in his back while he was running one day. It was kind of a dull ache. It kind of came and went. Not a big deal, but it just gradually got worse over time. Eventually, it became constant, mainly on the lower left side of his spine in the lumbar area. But sometimes it would be kind of more on the right side. Sometimes it would shoot down to his butt. He started having trouble sleeping because he was in pain. There was no neurological impairment, meaning reflexes are normal, strength is normal in his legs, sensation is normal, no evidence of any nerve damage. That was good. EMG is a test to test for nerve damage. That was normal. So he had an MRI. That's going to tell us what's wrong with him, right? Maybe. He had degenerative disc disease, and he had a moderate disc bulge at L4-5. So we started to get treatment, physical therapy, another course of physical therapy, not helping, pain management specialist, injections in the spine, not helping, Botox injections, piriformis injections is in the butt, more injections, a TENS unit. Let's try to distract your brain from pain by giving you this electrical stimulation. He got duloxetine, that's an antidepressant. He got gabapentin, it's a nerve pill, kind of like Lyrica. Someone gave him opiates. Is that a good idea? Well, but he wasn't getting better. So he said, well, I'll go another route. Let's try acupuncture. I'll take yoga. 2 years later, nothing's working. So he goes to the surgeon. The surgeon says, well, we can fix that disc, L4-5, bulging disc, no problem. He gets a fusion, L4-5. Doesn't help. Years go by, a year after that, another doctor says, well, your SI joint, the joint connecting the sacrum and the pelvis. SI joint's kind of like a joint connecting your ribs to your sternum. It's not much of a joint, but there's some arthritis there. We can fuse that. He had that surgery. Not better. When he was 42, started having neck pain. Now we got a whole nother thing to worry about. The MRI of his neck, facet degeneration, disc space narrowing, a small disc bulge. That doesn't sound good. He goes to see the neurosurgeon. He says, well, you're not a candidate for surgery in your neck. But epidural injections, he decided he already tried that in his lower back. He didn't want to do that. And his pain just continued. So he has lower back pain, he's got neck pain, and then within the last year he started having some stomach sensations, this fluttering sensation in his stomach. So now he goes to a pain psychologist and they give him relaxation exercises. He basically doesn't have a lot of hope of getting better at this point. That's the horror part of the story. So we have a problem in this country. More people are affected by chronic pain now than the combined total of diabetes, heart disease, and cancer. Millions of people are suffering a lot of back pain, headache pain, stomach pain, pelvic pain, widespread pain that we call fibromyalgia. Certain professions get repetitive strain injury. They get neck strain. They may have trouble with squinting because they're looking at screens all the time. Does that sound familiar? And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And the treatment is often completely ineffective. Pain management is kind of like, seems like a good idea, but do you want to really manage? Do we want to manage our pain? That's not what most people want. How many studies have shown that surgery, randomized controlled trials, show that back surgery is better than either exercise or conservative therapy? How many studies have shown that surgery is better than any non-surgical intervention? 0. Not a single study to show that. How about back injections? Large number of studies, meta-analysis of these studies. And when you compare in back injections versus placebo injections, the result, not much difference. How about opiates for pain? It's a national disaster. So let's work on the brain. Psychological therapies for pain. The main psychological therapies for pain: cognitive behavioral therapy, mindfulness therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy. None have been shown to be any better than the other. And none have been shown to be better than relaxation therapy, which is what he got. The effects are small, and people continue to suffer. So what are the things that weren't taught in medical school and are still not being taught? Still not being taught in medical school. I'm working with 3 medical schools trying to get more of this into the curriculum. Well, the power of the mind and the control that our brain actually has over our experiences. So now we talk about pain. This looks painful. A friend of mine inadvertently shot a nail in his hand. He had 0 pain. Pain only occurs if the brain activates a danger alarm mechanism. No danger alarm mechanism, no pain. Kids skin their knee and cry. Other times they skin their knee and don't cry. Or they cry when they see a concerned parent running. Our brain has to activate pain in order to experience pain. The body doesn't send pain signals to the brain. It sends signals, and our brain has to interpret if that signal is actually a danger or not. Our brain controls pain. All pain is in the brain. This guy was written up in the British Medical Journal, jumped off a scaffolding onto a nail impaled itself through his boot, rushed him to the hospital, a lot of pain. They hurriedly took his boot off. What did they find? The nail was positioned precisely between his toes, no injury at all. His brain had activated pain as a warning mechanism, but it was completely mistaken about the risk. I met a doctor a few years ago who told me this story. He was in the Vietnam War as a young man. His company got ambushed one day. He took shrapnel wound to his leg, had a lot of pain, got medevaced out. Comes home stateside, his injuries heal. What happens to injuries? All injuries heal. His brain turned off the danger alarm mechanism, and now he's fine. 20 years later, roughly, he's walking down the street. He gets startled by the sound of a helicopter coming up from behind, and he gets the same pain in his leg after all those years. How do we snap our fingers? How do we ride a bike? How do we do silly things like that? These things happen because our brain forms connections. Millions of brain cells connect themselves into neural circuits or a neural pathway for a specific purpose. That's how we live our lives. And his brain learned pain from the injury, remembered it all those years as a neural pathway, and then activated it later in life upon the mental association of the helicopter. And so there's this whole range of syndromes that all hang together. The chance that a tension or migraine headache is due to a structural problem in the brain is 2 or 3%. The vast majority of people with tension, migraine headaches, fibromyalgia, irritable bowel, most pelvic pain syndromes do not have structural problems in their body. And studies show that approximately 85% of people with neck or back pain do not have a clearly identifiable structural cause for that pain. 85%. And that's shocking. So what happens is that you may have somebody who's, let's say their father was, I'll exaggerate a little, not you, me, their father, my father, talking about me now, was, kind of critical and could be judgmental, a little bit harsh, and you have a sensitive young boy growing up in that environment. It certainly wasn't abusive, but the danger pathway becomes a little bit sensitized. And then you get to internship. So the first day of my internship, I'm a terrified young doctor. I start getting diarrhea. It lasts for 6 months. Something about being a doctor simply scared the crap out of me. And so the danger mechanism then is producing a symptom. Then I decide, oh, here's a good idea. I'll have kids. I'll try to get promoted in my job. I'll start doing research. I'll start working on national committees. Great idea. All these things are great ideas, but they cause stress. And then my neck starts to hurt. And I wake up in the morning and I go to work like this. You ever seen anybody go to work like this? It's pretty common. And what do they all say? I slept on it wrong. That's what I said for years. And my MRI shows these bulging discs and arthritis and all this stuff. And I still have these bulging discs in my brain, in my neck, but I don't have any pain now. And then, what if I get in a little car accident, fender bender, and then I begin to get other things, or something else happens in your life, and then it can just spiral from there. Because what happens is that the experience of having pain further activates the danger alarm mechanism, which activates more pain. So it's a vicious cycle of pain leading to fear of pain, leading to more pain. And that describes why many people with chronic pain get worse over time. And their pain tends to spread, like from their lower back to their middle back, or to their neck, or to their belly, like the guy that I was telling you about. And so what I explain to people is injuries send signals to the brain, and the brain has to decide. When I say the brain, these are processes that are happening completely outside of our conscious awareness. That's why American Horror Stories is an apt analogy, because the people move into this house that's haunted and everything is out of control. Things are happening to them. And people stuck in this spiral, like the patient I was telling you about, feel like things are happening to them that are completely outside of their control. And it's their brain that is doing it at a subconscious level. And emotional injury can activate the danger signal in exactly the same way as physical injury. And then pain becomes learned as a neural pathway. So when I evaluate patients with pain, and there's I should mention other things that are connected to this. So people with fatigue, insomnia, anxiety, depression are common ones. But if we're talking about pain, my job, number one, is this a structural problem? Like, you fell on your wrist, it's broken, you need a cast? Or is it a neural pathway problem? Because pain is a message that our brain is giving us. It's our job to encode it. I saw a woman a few years ago who had pain in her butt right here. And I said, well, when did it start? She said, well, right about the time my husband retired. And if you think about it, you guys aren't thinking about it. Are you thinking about it? That's a very different message. So my first job is to rule out a structural disorder. The guy that we're talking about, he had everything done to him that could be done structurally. Nothing had helped. He had a bulging disc. They already fixed it. They fixed things that weren't even broken. And so there's no evidence. He had no evidence of nerve damage. There was no evidence that he had a structural problem. So now my second job is to say, well, if we can rule out a structural problem, maybe we can rule in a neural pathway or a brain-induced problem. Well, this is a very important slide. It's a meta-analysis, 3,300 people, a bunch of studies lumped together. If you take completely healthy, pain-free 30-year-olds and you give them MRIs, 50% of them have disc degeneration. 40% have bulging discs, completely pain-free. If you take 50-year-olds, those numbers are 80% and 60%. And if you get to be the ripe old age like me, we're talking about 90% of people have degenerative disc, DDD, degenerative disc disease, like it's a disease. The vast majority of adults have abnormal MRIs that are not the cause of pain. And doctors don't know doctors know this information, it's not a secret. They just don't know what to do with it, how to interpret it, how to apply it in general. And so what were the messages that this patient that I was telling you about was getting from his doctors? The messages were, you're damaged. There's a problem here. It might be genetic. We don't know. We tried to fix it, but we couldn't fix it, which leads to no hope. No hope leads to more pain because of the vicious cycle. And then we're looking at a distribution pattern from a medical point of view. Someone has pain that starts on the left top of the head, the left side, it goes all the way down to the left torso, all the way down to the left leg. There's no disease that does that. There's no disease that has pain from in the morning and then it goes away by 2 in the afternoon and then it's gone the rest of the day. There's no disease that does that. And so we have to understand that we can evaluate people and rule in brain-induced pain. So what happens with an injury? You get an injury, it hurts, and then it gets better over 2 days or 5 days or a couple weeks. Fractures take 6 weeks to heal. But what we see, and you can diagnose people in your family and friends very easily by saying, oh, I got an injury and never healed. Well, how likely is that? Probably not. If the pain is continuing and worsening over time after a fairly mild injury, that's not the normal pattern. That's not structurally induced pain. The pain shifts from one area of the body to another. Fibromyalgia is classic for that. The pain is in the arms, and then the next day it's in the legs. It can shift on a dime because neural pathways can turn on and turn off, which is the beauty of what I do because people can get better. Symptoms spread, as I mentioned, often bilateral. The brain often says, well, I hurt my right wrist, and now my left wrist is hurting. That's a red flag for me. Social contagion, we talked about that. There's a study from Germany. The Berlin Wall came down in 1989, I believe. In 1991, they started studying back pain in East Germany and West Germany, these two populations. And the West German back pain was up here, and the East German back pain was down here. And over time, the East German back pain just rose to the level of West German back pain as those cultures mixed. And the conclusion of the article was that back pain is a contagious disorder. Interesting. Not all cultures have the amount of back pain that we have in this culture. A friend of mine was a doctor in Iraq, and when he came here, he said, why does everyone have back pain here? People don't come to the doctor for back pain in Iraq. I know, maybe they have other problems, but they did come to the doctor for their other problems. They just didn't come for back pain. So it's a different paradigm. The paradigm that all pain is due to injury in the body and is simply reflected in the brain is not working for people with brain-induced symptoms. We need a different paradigm. And if you're aware of the history of science, paradigms don't shift easily. It can take decades for a paradigm, for an idea that initially seems completely counterintuitive to go to totally obvious. Plate tectonics, the idea that the continents were all together in one thing, you can see, if you look at the map, you can see how they fit together like a puzzle, right? It took 50 years for scientists to agree that that's what had happened. 50 years. And it's obvious, you can see it. So the symptoms of this disorder are real, but they're not damaging. The brain has been sensitized, and the brain has the power to produce even very severe symptoms. And most people have this, at least to some degree. It's a very common phenomenon. We believe that the majority of people with chronic pain have this phenomenon and are being treated by an old paradigm. Yet skepticism continues to abound. What do? The interventions are straightforward and inexpensive. The most important one is understanding that this is what's going on, because people who get it, who understand, like, oh my goodness, I'm not damaged, I'm not broken, I can get better, that allows them to do the work of detaching from the symptoms. Whereas people who are under the belief that they're actually damaged, it's very hard to do that. And so the idea is that people need to really understand, and that's why I spend so much time examining people and listening to their story and looking for those details that are going to make or break the case, so to speak. So this is a woman who I never met. She says 21 months post-op, 3rd back surgery, 3-level fusion, doesn't sound good. 21 months trying every therapy to get out of enormous, unrelenting back pain, on top of 22 years of chronic, limiting back pain. No success. My doctor sent me a link to your website. That's my website, 6 days. I considered the possibility that this could apply to me. I came back, I read it again. I said, oh my God, that's me. I see it, it's obvious. Shift, paradigm shift. And what happened to her pain? It just went down. Most people don't have that kind of response, but when you have the response that you actually get it and you see the paradigm shift and you see what's going on, then you have the opportunity to get better, to get completely better. And she had a dramatic effect just from understanding and learning about this model. And then she said, well, I started walking. Before I could barely walk around the building, but I kept telling myself, what did she tell herself? I can walk. I can walk. I'm okay. I'm not damaged. And she starts walking. And she says, wow, forgive me for being effusive, but from going from crippled, fearful, bewildered, discouraged, bordering on despair, to regaining my life, it's kind of a minor miracle. So once people get the idea and understand what's going on, then they can begin to reduce the danger alarm mechanism. They can begin to worry less about the pain, stop anticipating it, stop monitoring it, stop allowing the pain to dominate their every thought and every action, begin to re-engage in physical and social activities despite pain, knowing that they actually can, knowing that they're not damaged, knowing that they can get better. I'm going to talk about mindfulness in a minute. So this is a woman, she said, I had a huge success today. I was determined to go for a walk, but my back was killing me. So I said to my brain, I'm going for a walk today. You can either make this easy or you can make this difficult. But we're going. It's kind of like those old gangster movies where they say, you're going to talk. You can either make it easy or difficult, but you're going to talk. And she's saying to her brain, look, this is how it's going to be. We have the ability to change our neural pathways because the brain is neuroplastic. As we think differently, as we act differently, we can soothe the brain and calm that danger alarm mechanism, which is kind of like calming a child who's really upset. And if you keep doing it and you keep working at it, what happens is most people get better. So research now confirms that all pain is a protective mechanism via neural pathways. It can be triggered by structural disorder or by simply the neural pathways in the brain. And a significant proportion of pain that we have is brain-induced. MRI findings are often not correlated with pain. And we can make this distinction between structural pain versus non-structural pain, or sometimes it's a combination of the two, because the treatments are radically different. And reversal of this syndrome can occur when you combine an understanding of it, when you combine the cognitive, behavioral, and the emotional interventions. The results can be dramatic. So as I said, paradigms don't shift easily. As Sherlock Holmes said, there's nothing more deceptive than an obvious fact. You, just hearing what you heard today, and maybe you knew all this stuff, but you will run into people with this syndrome frequently. It's that common. And it's easy to recognize when you just know what you're looking for. And how are most people going to react if you happen to mention it? Disbelief and outright rejection. That's what happens. But the more people who understand pain the way you do now, the more likely the paradigm will shift.
Okay, so the key takeaways from these videos that you need to remember are the purpose of pain is to protect us from danger. Chronic pain is pain that persists for longer than 12 weeks. Pain always originates from our brains, not our minds, but our brains. Pain is not a psychological problem, it's a neurological problem. And the autonomic nervous system determines whether or not to generate pain and how strong the signal should be. Chronic pain is a vicious cycle that often gets worse and spreads to other areas of the body. Chronic pain can be felt in any part of the body, and sometimes it spreads all over the body. Chronic pain can be continuous or intermittent. Because pain comes from our autonomic nervous system, it is outside of our conscious awareness. Pain is not something we have chosen in any way. The source of chronic pain is not psychological, it's neurological. It is a neurological problem where pain circuits are malfunctioning. All injuries heal within 12 weeks, and usually a lot sooner. But sometimes the brain continues to send out pain signals because it mistakenly perceives that there is still a danger of further tissue damage, even though there is no more danger. Conventional treatments may have some benefits, but they don't cure chronic pain because they fail to fix the source of the problem. Pain always comes from the part of the brain which is designed to protect us from danger. The brain projects the pain to a part or parts of our body so that it feels like the pain is coming from those parts. Sometimes the brain makes mistakes and sends out a pain signal when it should not, or fails to send out a pain signal when it should. Remember the neuroscientist who was bitten by a highly venomous snake. His brain mistakenly determined that there was no danger and therefore no pain was required because he had just brushed up against a branch. Then on another very similar occasion, he brushed up against a branch and his brain determined that he had been bitten, and it generated a tremendous pain signal, even when it was just a small scratch and there was no danger. Remember the guy who had a nail through his fingers and felt no pain. His brain failed to generate a pain response. This illustrates how pain does not come from damaged tissues. Pain always comes from our autobrain. Sometimes it makes mistakes. Remember the construction worker who had a nail come up through his boot. He had tremendous pain, even though there was no tissue damage, because the nail had come up between his toes. His brain generated a pain signal, even though it should not have. Remember the wounded Vietnam veteran who re-experienced his pain after 20 years when a helicopter flew overhead. The brain can mistakenly trigger pain in response to a situation that it perceives to be a danger. Imaging studies like X-rays and MRIs are worthless in determining whether or not someone will experience pain or what the source of someone's pain is. For example, the majority of people who experience low back pain have physical defects like degenerative disc disease or bulging discs, but have no pain. This is really important to remember and understand because it proves that even though the tissues of the body may not be perfect, there is no need for pain. And most people don't experience pain for those imperfections. We may have imperfections that show up on MRIs and X-rays, but after 12 weeks, and usually sooner, healing has already occurred, and those tissues are not in danger anymore and don't require a pain signal. This is a key point, and it was very hard for me to get my head around it because for a long time, pain had convinced me that my tissues were damaged and I was in danger, that there was danger of further damage. There was also plenty of evidence externally as to why I was damaged. Let me explain a little bit about that. In 2017, I decided to have some PRP injections to alleviate pain. The procedure would be performed in Colorado at the Regenix Clinic with Dr. Chris Centeno. Dr. Centeno had me get some MRIs and had me go to a local doctor who would administer some injections of lidocaine so that they could determine where the pain was coming from in my low back. I went to see that anesthesiologist, and I was laying on a fluoroscopy table. You know, it's a real-time x-ray. While the doctor was looking at the images on a screen off to the side. I heard him mutter, "What a mess," just under his breath. And he called a nurse over, and she said, "Well, what's the problem?" And he said, "I can't find any of the landmarks that I usually use for the injections." And at that point, I looked over and said, "Are you saying that I was butchered?" And he said, "Yes, you were butchered." We finally determined later that there was a lot of pain coming from my SI joint, my left SI joint. When I showed up in Colorado for the PRP injections, Dr. Centeno examined my back and got upset by the way the surgery had been done. And I told him what the anesthesiologist had said, and he agreed, saying, "Yes, you were butchered. I'm so sorry this happened to you." The MRIs showed that my multifidus muscles along my spine, those are the muscles that stabilize the spine, had died. They were completely dead. It also showed that part of the fusion had failed and that there was little left of my lumbar discs. The PRP injections were successful. They stabilized my SI joint, but they didn't cure the chronic pain. So there are some very solid reasons why I should have pain. But I have no pain because my brain has stopped sending out unnecessary pain signals. Now, at this point, you may be thinking, yeah, but my problem is different because my pain is not in my back, or it's in my knees, or it's in my shoulder, or it's headaches, or whatever. Or it only hurts once in a while when I try to lift something, or bend over, or I sit too long, or I reach, or I walk too far, or climb stairs, or some other activity. Or you may be saying my pain comes from inflammation or some other cause. None of that really matters. If you have pain that's persisted continuously or intermittently beyond 12 weeks, then it serves no useful purpose. All of the healing has already happened. The pain is no longer protecting you from further injury, and it is safe to turn it off. The truth about chronic pain is that it becomes a disease itself. And it's a serious threat to your health, besides destroying the quality of your life. If it continues for very long, then it's likely to spread. You can go ahead and Google long-term effects of chronic pain, or chronic pain and heart disease, or chronic pain and dementia. Chronic pain is a serious danger, and you should not tolerate or ignore it. For me, chronic pain has resulted in life-threatening heart disease and brain atrophy. This past year, I had 6 mini strokes and a heart attack. I'm the only one in my family to have heart disease. So thanks a lot, chronic pain, not. I've been without chronic pain now for 14 months. I can easily do so many things that were very difficult or impossible before. It's the simple things that bring joy to me now. It's things like being able to sit through dinner with my family or to play table games. I can sit through meetings for 3 hours at a time. Before, if I sat for more than 20 minutes, there was going to be a lot of pain and consequences the next day of even more pain. Now I've sat for as long as 4 hours at a stretch driving the car, My wife shakes her head in disbelief as she sees me outside with a 25-pound leaf blower backpack, running around the yard, blowing all the leaves and cleaning up. I've even been to the driving range to hit golf balls. That's something I never thought I'd be able to do. It's wonderful to be able to do normal stuff. So by now you've got to be asking, okay, great, but what's the next step? How do I use this information to turn off my pain? Look down below in the video description and you're going to find a link to a PDF file and it's going to show you exactly how it's done. And I just want to wish you the very, very best of luck. So take a look and see what you think.